In the previous videos, we have learnt about water and minerals that are being transported through xylem. Now, we are going to learn how food is transported through phloem, that is, the translocation of sugars is through phloem. As we all know that water and minerals are being transported through xylem in the plants and food is transported through phloem in the plants. So, this is the last topic of this chapter. When we talk about phloem transport, the food is primarily sucrose, which is being transported by the vascular tissues of phloem from a source. That means a source we refer to as a leaf, and to sink, and sink we refer to any part of the plant in which the food is being stored. So, the phloem transport is from a source to a sink. Here we have told that the source is leaf and sink is any part of the plant in which the food is being stored. But the source and sink may be reversed depending on the season or the plant's needs. Sometimes the sugars that are being stored in the roots may be mobilized to become as a source in the early spring when the buds of trees acts as a sink. See, sometimes the leaf acts as a source and sometimes it doesn't, whereas the root acts as a source. So, it, the direction may be changed. Since the source and sink relationship is variable, the direction of the movement of phloem can be upwards or downwards, that is bidirectional. If you see in xylem, it is always unidirectional. But in the case of phloem, the movement is bidirectional, that is upwards or downwards. In xylem, the movement of water and minerals is in only one way, and if we see in phloem, the food is in a two-way flow. It is bidirectional, either upward or it is downward. So xylem is always unidirectional and phloem is bidirectional.
Food in phloem sap can be transported in any required direction. Phloem sap is mainly water and sucrose, but other sugars, hormones, and amino acids are also transported or translocated through phloem. An experiment is suggested by Munch which helps in understanding bidirectional phloem transport in plants. But before going to know about that, we need to know what is the structure of phloem.
Phloem consists of sieve plates, sieve tubes, companion cells, and phloem parenchyma. The accepted mechanism used for the translocation of sugars from source to sink is called pressure flow hypothesis or mass flow hypothesis. The food that is prepared at the source by photosynthesis is converted to sucrose. The sugar is then moved in the form of sucrose into the companion cells and then into the living phloem sieve tube cells by the active transport. This process of loading of the source produces a hypertonic condition in the phloem. Water in the adjacent xylem moves into the phloem by osmosis. As a result of this, an osmotic pressure is built up in the phloem where the phloem sap moves to the areas of lower pressure. Finally, the movement of sugars in the phloem begins source where sugars are loaded actively into a sieve tube. Loading of phloem sets up a water potential gradient that facilitates mass movement in the phloem. Phloem tissue is composed of sieve tube cells which form long columns. They have holes in their end walls. They are called sieve plates. As hydrostatic pressure in the phloem sieve tubes increases, pressure flow begins and the sap moves through the phloem. Meanwhile, at the sink, incoming sugars are actively transported out of the phloem and removed as complex carbohydrate. Because of the loss of solutes produces a higher water potential in the phloem and the water passes out again returning to the xylem. Finally, a simple experiment called girdling is conducted to identify the tissues through which food is transported. On the bark of the tree, if you cut it and into a depth of the phloem layer and it is removed carefully, after few weeks, if you observe, the stem becomes swollen. This is because of phloem. The phloem tissue is responsible for the translocation of food and the transport takes place in one direction towards the roots. This experiment can be performed very easily. So finally, this is all about translocation of food, that is the transport of food through phloem. By this, with this chapter is finished.